When it comes to wine, we usually think of it as a naturally occurring product of the fermentation of grape. Yet, modern wine production has utilized a wide variety of chemicals to assist this natural fermentation process. On the New York Times website, there's an article by Eric Asimov, who raised the concern that the wine label does not require the manufacturer to list every single chemicals used in the winemaking process, which might be potentially harmful to human body. With this question in mind, we reached out to the winery in our region to investigate further and hoping to get some useful and professional insight on this matter.
We were very lucky to interview Steve Fake, the winemaker of San Antonio Winery at Pasadena. He gave us a tour to their lab and warehouse for chemicals. Besides pH and acid-base titration, the lab is using malolactic chromatography, a method of thin layer chromatography with wine as a mobile phase to supervise wine's fermentation. Tartaric acid, malic acid, and lactic acid are the signal compounds of this chromatography, as tartaric acid should transfer to lactic acid in the natural fermentation process. So by monitoring these acids, people can figure out if the fermentation is completed. For the adding chemicals, they're using tartaric acid to assist the fermentation. Potassium sulfide is added at several points in the process and is present in the finished wine in the form of sulfate salt, which kills unwanted yeast and bacteria and protects wine from oxidation. Bentonite is another inorganic stabilizer they use. It segregates the unwanted protein impurities, which makes the distillation process easier. At the end, we have a small interview with Steve talking about his background and his perspective as a winemaker on using the chemicals in wine production.
Steve, tell us about your story and how did you become a winemaker?
I started working at a winery at the bottom. I was cleaning floors and cleaning tanks and doing like just menial tasks like that. And I ended up working there all through high school, all 4 years of high school. By the end of those 4 years, I was helping out with harvest. I was helping bring in grapes. I was helping doing fermentation. I was gaining a lot of experience in the wine industry. I went away to college not thinking I was going to be in wine at all. I actually thought I was going to go into foreign relations. That was my first plan. But every summer when I would come back from college, I would work at a winery to make money. And I ended up getting my degree in business. Still wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I graduated college, and came back in the Napa Valley, started working at a winery, and eventually I got a job with the Gallo Corporation. Oh. And I worked for them for 5 years. I moved into a winemaking position with them. Less manual labor and more strategic planning and quality assurance and tasting and blending of the wine and the actual, more of the chemistry side of the wine. And then 5 years ago I moved down here, so I have 20 years experience now.
How important is chemistry in the winemaking process?
So chemistry in the winemaking process is it's the crux of winemaking. So without chemistry there is no wine. Without fermentation there wouldn't be wine. So it's a very simple organic process that happens in the world without humans doing anything, and that's probably how it was discovered. Someone probably just left a bunch of sweet fruit or something in a bucket and didn't do anything about it, and then after a month or so, or even a couple days, fermentation can happen so fast in the right environment. They tasted that and realized there was something wrong with it, and they probably got a little drunk, and that was probably what happened. But it's very important. The conversion of sugar to alcohol and carbon dioxide is basically the foundation of winemaking, and so in that chemistry it's all chemistry at that point. There's a certain amount of there's a certain amount of artistry and blending with flavors and trying to hit a flavor profile for your customers, or just trying to create something new, trying to create something that no one's ever tasted before. That's very artistic. It's less chemical, less scientific, but there are scientific and chemical reasons why you taste those things and why those things come through, and particularly with what we do to the wine chemically, with adding sulfur, with screening for biological processes, things like that. So it's extremely important. It's
Are the chemicals used in the winemaking process harmful to us? What's your perspective?
We had sort of talked about it earlier. the trace amount of harmful chemicals that we use in wine is so very small. Yeah. I don't see it as unless someone is really sensitive to sulfur dioxide or possibly potassium sorbate. All of these things are in every soft drink that you've ever had in your life. So that I really don't see a real argument against that. There could be someone that's allergic to certain things. I think really you're way more susceptible to the alcohol that's in the product, and that's what everybody's affected. That's what everybody is affected by. That is much more of a harmful chemical, and I wouldn't say harmful meaning don't drink alcohol, but it's obviously that's more of a influencing chemical than anything else, and it has way more capacity to affect someone than the trace amounts of sulfur dioxide or copper sulfate or potassium sorbate or any of these other chemicals, inorganic chemicals that we use in our wines. There are organic wines being made. That's what they're called, organic wines, where they don't use inorganic products and chemicals. They don't add them directly. I know some of the wineries will spray vineyards with sulfur to kind of keep things from living and growing inside their vineyards. But I think it's great. That's how all winemaking used to be. There weren't processed chemicals 100 years ago. Genetically processed or in a lab processed, inorganic or organic. So I think it's great that people try that. But in my opinion, my experience, it doesn't make that much of a difference. I've also tried a lot of these organic wines, and there's no taste difference. There's definitely no taste difference. And the alcohol affects you the same. So I think it's really, for me, that's my outlook on it. But however anybody wants, whatever makes people feel comfortable.
Based on what we just talked about, we can confirm that the chemicals are essential to winemakers. With this in mind, whether or not to put them on the label shouldn't be our first concern.